But let's turn to the MPP for a second, because in a way we're trying to address folk who are thinking about coming to Blavatnik School, who want to know a little bit more about what the Blavatnik School does, and interested to hear from you as people who have invested a year of your life at the school as to what you've taken from it. So if you don't mind, we might sort of ask the questions a little bit chronologically. So start by thinking about what it was that first interested you in the MPP and attracted you to applying to the Blavatnik School. So why don't we go in reverse order? So Andrea, Garaiova, do you want to start with that one and just say a little bit about how you discovered the course and what prompted you to apply to it?
Well, before I did the MPP, I actually already completed another master's, which was a traditional academic master's. And I ventured into the world, and I thought that now I would be implementing all the great things that I learned during my studies. But I was confronted with the reality where I realized I don't really have the skills. And of course, there are skills that you learn throughout your lifetime and throughout the career. But I felt like I didn't really get from the first master's what I could have been given to make a bigger impact in the work that I was doing. So I was looking for a course that would enable me to do that, and also that would enable me to feel like part of a larger community of really passionate people who truly care about making a positive impact in the world. And I also like the idea that the MPP at Oxford was a new course. My cohort was just the third one. And I had an assumption that as a result of that, the course would be a bit more flexible in search of the innovative ways of delivering public policy focused education. And the last thing I would say is that I also always dreamt about going to Oxford. So, that was the last job.
Great. Sven, does that resonate with you? Did you have similar motivations, or was yours a different story?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm a medical doctor, right? And I did that with a lot of passion. Went to South Africa for parts of my training in a trauma unit in Soweto, which I loved a lot because you have young people who were just fine, and then something bad happens to them. They get shot or stabbed or whatever. It's really great. And I thought this would be my place. But after a while, I realized that for every person we treated, we had 2 new ones coming in. A lot of the women who've been assaulted and so on, they went back to the people who did that to them because they didn't believe in the rule of law where they lived. And it felt pretty much like fighting the Hydra. You chop off one head, but then you see 2 new ones growing back. Every patient you treat, you have 2 or 3 new ones rolling in. And I thought, I don't want to look back onto a life where all I do is stitching up wounds that shouldn't be there in the first place, literally. And my initial reaction to that was to study public health, which I did at the LSHTM in London by distance learning. It was fabulous, but I realized that often you end up writing a recommendation and you hope that somebody tells somebody else what to do with it, and sort of that translation often gets lost. And I met a person in a surgeon in South Africa who studied at Oxford and really impressed me. And sort of when I got my medical degree, I was very frustrated, not feeling happy at all because I knew I wasn't in the right place. I called him, and then afterwards I went on the webpage of Oxford, where sort of Blavatnik School just said its first year, and everything that was in the curriculum, from negotiation to mass communication, etc., was exactly the piece that I felt was missing in sort of my purpose, which was finding the way to translate a good idea into something that then becomes, I don't know, an incentive structure that that incentivizes individuals to do what's good for society, etc.
Great, thanks, Sven. Andrea, resonance for you?
So my story is quite similar to Andrea's. Actually, I also did another master's before and thought I had it all figured out, started working. I'd been working for several years before I applied for the MPP at Oxford. And I just found myself thinking I need to do something different. I need to redirect my career. I need to give it a bit of boost, but I wasn't sure what to do. So I was looking at different programs, but kind of always led me back to an MPP type of a program. And I think just discovering the MPP at Blavatnik was a bit of an accident because it was still quite a new program, and kind of similar, like Sven and Andrea said, it just fit. It all seemed to fit really well. I was looking for an applied course because I did think that what I had done so far, I wanted to use that knowledge and build on top of it and then do something better. And so I wanted a program where I could actually really acquire practical skills, and that was the MPP. And on top of that, I have to say that the summer placement was also a big bonus, because I was also looking for an opportunity to kind of try something different. And so being able to do that within the framework of my degree, kind of testing, trying something different and seeing how I like that, maybe that's more for me, was also a great bonus for me.
Great. Thank you. Those are all very positive reasons. Let me ask though, did you have any apprehensions? Were there any aspects as you were thinking about applying to the MPP that gave you concerns, or worries that you had at all about applying to the Blavatnik School or to Oxford in general? Why don't we start with you, Sven? You've not started yet.
Sure. Well, my father was really disappointed because he felt I should start working and not getting another degree. Then obviously finances were not a concern. My mother felt I shouldn't set myself up for disappointment. So I was even happier when it worked out in the end. For me, it was mostly a concern because I'm a medic, right? So I come from a very operational background. Was very different, and I felt that maybe a lot of the things I wouldn't really be able to contribute. But at the end of the day, I think the diversity that we had, including engineers and lawyers and almost every profession and every nationality is present in this school, is exactly what the strength is. And it's great to have this very different perspective and to learn how everybody has been socialized, both culturally and professionally and academically and so on, in so many different ways, and to challenge one's own views was probably one of the biggest things I took from this.
Good, thank you. Andrea, Klaric, what were your worries, if you had any, about applying?
I did. I mean, definitely after, well, maybe better to say my worries came after I got admitted, and then it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? So now I have to do this. Well, definitely first financially, it's a big investment. So I was thinking, it really has to be worth it, not just in terms of the school fees, but also I had been working, so it's also potentially the income I'm going to lose and taking a year off my career. So it really needed to be a program that will definitely add value. So looking back, it definitely did. It was a really good choice, but I can't say it was without a worry. But
sure. Okay, thanks. Andrea, Garaiova.
I would echo what Andrea and Sven said in terms of the financing. That definitely was a big concern, and I was really happy about the admission, but really for me, the real admission confirmation came with the scholarship confirmation, when I knew that I was able to actually do the course. Other than that, I was very young when I was applying and starting the course. I think the age average at the time was 27. I was just 23. And even though I had a few years of work experience, I was very aware of the fact that I might not have the same amount of experience to contribute as my other MP peers.
Okay.
So that was something that was on my mind, being able to prove the experience that I had, but also then being able to contribute to the experience of the cohort once I was on the course.
Great. So Andrea, you just mentioned, and Sven, you mentioned as well, this anxiety about, in a way, what did you have to bring, partly from a professional and disciplinary background and maybe partly from an age background. But Sven, you also mentioned the diversity of the programme, and I wondered if each of you could just say a little bit about how you experienced that. I think we think in the school that it is a strength. We also recognise that at times in the year it can be a real challenge, and it possibly takes each cohort a little bit of time early on to get used to the incredible diversity of different countries and ages and professional backgrounds. So I wondered if each of you could just reflect a little bit on what that was like, both in the moment you were living it and now as you reflect back on it and the friendships that you made at the school, you know, how you would reflect on that as a potentially a positive thing about the MPP. Why don't we start with you, Andrea, Klaric?
Yeah, sure. So before starting the course, I actually thought I had been in very diverse environments. I did my bachelor's and my master's degree abroad, and they were international programs. And I thought, I've experienced diversity. I'm kind of a cosmopolitan, citizen of the world. And it was really, really different. It was always a very European environment for me before. And now coming to Oxford, that was entirely different. I think we were 120 people from 60 plus countries. A lot of these people had very different views, very different backgrounds, very different experiences. And there were often kind of clashes, but more often than not, it was also just exchanging our experiences, learning from each other. So I think I would even say that was one of the most rewarding parts of the program. And even now, like I've graduated a year ago, we still all keep in touch. We still talk about current issues. So it's definitely something that I am like definitely remembering that as one of the best parts of the program.
Okay. Andrea, Garaiova?
I think I would very much support what Andrea mentioned. I also had studied abroad in France and UK, and I thought that I was exposed to so many different cultures that there was nothing to surprise me at Oxford and on the MPP in this sense. But I have to say that it did. And as Andrea said, it was incredibly rewarding because not only we were able to discuss issues in the classroom, but after every class, basically, we went out for lunches and dinners, and we continued discussing. And we were able to have a debate around the nature of constitutionality in the UAE, comparing it to something that happens in Central Europe, things that otherwise really there would be nothing to prompt you to think about, but that were extremely instructive for all of us, I think, and that has stayed with me. And as Andrea said, we keep in touch, but for us, it's been 5 years now. So it shows that there is some sort of durability to the relationships that are built.
Thanks. Sven, what's your take on that question?
I think you're exposed to diversity in various areas of your life. So obviously there's BSG, but then there's also your college, and there is the odd encounter at, I don't know, the gym or any sport you choose, at any activity. There are the pubs where you run into other people who are all very amazing. I think most of the friends that I value the most are either directly from that time or introduced to me by friends of friends who met at Oxford as well. I once went to Lebanon and just randomly wrote to a group of Oxford alumni in the capital. The dinner, and suddenly I'm meeting all these amazing people in the city that I've never been to, that I have no connection to. I still have regular Skype sessions with friends from Malawi, or I don't know, you name it. So that's amazing. During the study, sometimes I was honestly a bit frustrated with it at times, because then you might have some very strong cultural clashes, where maybe some cultures are stereotypically a bit more dominant in group conversations, or sort of you feel like, okay, this is a very one-sided view. You know, other cultures have other views on this. How about we expand the diversity of our conversation a little bit? Or where you feel like being a foreigner when English isn't your mother tongue, you're disadvantaged in some of the arguments, or you need to say something else, but then it gets judged in a different way, and you don't really have the chance to correct it and so on. But looking back, I think even these things that I felt were frustrating turned out to be some of the most valuable lessons that I've learned for everything I did afterwards, because now I'm conscious of that, and I really wasn't before. So it was very good.
Thank you. So Sven, you've just introduced there in your description of the kind of wider diversity in Oxford, some of the benefits of studying in this university that extend a little bit beyond the school for all of the school's strengths. I suppose I've a two-part question for you each. One, when you think back, you know, was there an Oxford highlight, something that was a real highlight of being part of this university, perhaps something you didn't expect when you came to the programme? And then secondly, to that question, how much did you think about Oxford in applying? A couple of you mentioned that Oxford itself was a draw, but did you fully understand, say, the complexities of the college system, that you would belong to a college as well as to the school? And on reflection, if you were speaking to somebody new who was thinking, should I apply to Oxford? Should I apply to other universities or schools? What would you say are some of the unique advantages of the Oxford environment? So yeah, one specific Oxford memory that you hold dearly from your time, and then a more general thing about, you know, what is it like to be an Oxford student and what does that have to speak to it? Andrea, Garaiova, do you want to start this one?
The specific memory that is particularly dear to me actually doesn't have much to do with the academic side of things, but I think it expresses really well the spirit at Oxford. I come from Slovakia, so when I got to Oxford, I felt that it was a national obligation for me to try ice hockey once I had the opportunity to do so. So I was a really, really poor ice hockey player for my college for about 6 weeks. After my after a slight injury, I ended my infamous career. But what I learned from it was that at Oxford, one can be almost anything that you can imagine, simply because the environment is incredibly supportive. So no matter what idea you have, what project is on your mind, what you would like to try, there's always someone to support you to make it happen. And that is something that is really unique. That's not something you encounter in the real world. It's definitely a thing that I really, really appreciate about Oxford.
Great. Let's go to another one. Sven, what's your special Oxford memory that we could publish on video?
I was just going to say there are a million ones that pop up whenever I come back. Every corner brings up a smile or memory or something that touched me. But I think that the thing that really had an impact was the amount of small interactions where suddenly you sit in front of somebody who wrote one of the core books in psychiatry, or the people we had from the ex-CIA, head of the CIA, etc., and you have coffee with them, and sort of you inhale how they behave, how they speak, how they reason, and so on. How your peers do that. We studied with somebody who had to drop out of class because he became an ambassador somewhere, and you realize it's difficult to do both at the same time. And all of these things, and particularly the curiosity of all of these people. So I remember that in medicine, sometimes I had some thoughts that I didn't really dare express because it sort of wasn't within the zeitgeist of healthcare. And then I came to Oxford, and people got really curious. Why are you doing this? What brought you here? And they didn't really dare talk about it, but then they kept nagging. And when I sort of started to share some thoughts, I realized that they already know other people who've been working on that too, and that they introduced me to others and so on. It's kind of like a self-aid group for misfits in a way, with a mission. And it can be very encouraging and very empowering for everything that comes afterwards. And I've seen that not only for myself, but a lot of other people who suddenly realize that they feel understood, and the place where they come from suddenly doesn't feel right for them anymore, in a good way.
Very interesting. Andrea, Klaric.
So for me, it's similarly, it's just, it's impossible to kind of pinpoint one thing that I would say was, but it's definitely a unique experience that I did not know what I was getting myself into, definitely did not understand it. But I, similarly to Andrea, going to Oxford was a childhood dream, but the reality was way, way better. So what I would say, what I definitely enjoyed was all the talks and conferences, debates that we got to go to, not just at BSG, but in different colleges across the university. And I had the amazing opportunity of meeting my hero, who I wanted to be when I was growing up, a famous war correspondent, Christian Amanpour, when I saw that she was coming to speak, it was just, I just couldn't believe it. So there were so many different opportunities like that. But then also what I really enjoyed was the student life that students created themselves. So what we did at during our year was that all of the more athletic students who actually rowed, for example, for the university or for their colleges, they kind of gathered around, and during our last term, they got a bunch of other MPPers like myself who were not really inclined to wake up early in the morning and be like very committed to these things, and they taught us how to row. So we had the opportunity to kind of experience it, going out in the river and rowing all together at 5, 6 in the morning, and it was amazing. It's kind of one of the things that are just, you have to tick that box, right? But we also did some other things during our when we were at towards the end of our year. We also organized a policy slam for students from outside the academic community of the university, for the high school students. And it was very much student-led, organized, and run completely. So it was a great opportunity to see all these students kind of doing whatever kind of they wanted, and the academic community, BSG in that instance, really supported us and gave us the opportunity to do that. We occupied the entire school with a bunch of school kids that day, and we were fully supported by all our professors who even came to speak to the students, to the high schoolers. So it was a great year where we could really do whatever we wanted. So that's a great memory.
That's great. Thank you so much. So look, I'll make this my last question. You've been really generous with your time. I guess, you know, the purpose of having this chat this evening is partly that, as I explained, we're really keen to encourage applicants from Europe to think that the Blavatnik School is somewhere where they could live out their dreams and fulfill their ambitions in terms of studying public policy. So I guess I'm just really interested to hear from each of you. You each have different journeys that have brought you to the school, and you've each gone on to do fascinating things since you left. But what would your message be to other folk from Europe who are thinking about applying, who are maybe thinking, well, you know, why would I go there? As you've mentioned, you know, I might have concerns about whether I'd fit in. You might have concerns about the relative fees of a program here as compared to some other programs potentially in European universities. So what would your message be to those people about why it's worth considering the Blavatnik School? Let's start with you, Andrea Garaiova.
This is a difficult one. What would be the main message? I would say that once the school sees in you someone who can contribute to the experience of the other students, there's a lot of support that is offered to you to be able to come and study at BSG and at Oxford. So I would encourage everyone not to be discouraged by the financial burden, because there are solutions to it. The school has been really good at providing scholarships to the students, and therefore really the biggest barrier probably is just believing in yourself and giving it a go. And it can be intimidating because it is Oxford after all, and many of us were conscious of the quality that the university is looking for, the quality of students and professors, and we were questioning ourselves whether we were up to the task. And many of us were positively surprised that that might be the case. So I would definitely say give it a try, try your best, and do not get discouraged by people around you who might not be as optimistic.
Thank you. Andrea, Klaric, what would you say?
Well, similar to Andrea, I'd say also it was a very difficult and challenging year. The professors were demanding. I, for example, personally put a lot of kind of demands on myself as well, but now it was definitely all worth it, because I've never been put in such challenging situations that were in the end so rewarding. And I have also realized that I could do things that I couldn't even imagine I could, because I never dared to challenge myself in such a way. So it is definitely worth it. I had so many concerns as well before starting, financial concerns, whether I'm good enough, whether I should actually be that. Spent the first half of the year having the imposter syndrome. But definitely it was a transformative experience that once you go through, it is incredibly rewarding. And I just wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone. It is definitely worth it.
Thanks. Sven, unusually you get the final word.
Thanks. All I can say is that for me, there's a life before and after the PSG. A lot has changed. It was a transformative experience, and I've experienced a lot of other good universities. I've even went to Cambridge and so on, but it was nothing that was as deeply transformative in a very, very good way as this. And it keeps changing me still. Like I still realize years later, the compound interest of that sort of investment I made, and even the journey itself was fantastic. So I don't really know how you can overthink this. I would just apply and just do it, and the cost somehow you'll be fine, right? I think you'll be fine. I'm not getting paid for saying this. I don't have any shares at PSG or anything. I truly believe that, and I nudged quite a lot of people into applying to PSG or Oxford in general as a result of my experience, and nobody was disappointed so far.
Okay. Look, guys, thank you so much.